Tonight, IMF issues scathing assessment of Bank of Ghana's Gold for Reserves program, which has resulted in over $200 million in losses as the fund fingers GoldBod off-takers fee and trading shortfalls as key factors fueling the losses. We have details tonight as the IMF reveals the growing size of the Gold for Reserve program poses significant threat to the Bank of Ghana. Well, tonight, the International Monetary Fund has identified operational costs from GoldBod alongside trading shortfalls as the major drivers behind losses under the Bank of Ghana's Gold for Reserve program, which climbed to some $214 million within the first 9 months of 2025. Now, the disclosure is contained in the International Monetary Fund's Fifth Review report on Ghana's 3-year Standard Credit Facility program, which flags the losses as a key downside risk to the country's broader stabilisation agenda. According to the fund, the losses were largely driven by trading losses incurred under the artisanal and small-scale mining gold transactions component of the program, as well as the off-takers fee linked to GoldBod operations. JoyNews research team have kept an active tab on the report, and head of research, Kofi Agyei, joins me in studio with some breakdown. Kofi, let's start with the IMF and what they said about losses associated with the BoG's Gold for Reserve program.
Well, Kojo, so we have a copy of that IMF review report, the fifth review report on Ghana. And if you go to page 22, that is where the IMF actually gives this assessment on the Bank of Ghana's, domestic gold purchase program. And so if you look at point 36 on that page, a caption says that the domestic gold purchase program of the Bank of Ghana, and the IMF says that this poses risk to the financial stability of the Bank of Ghana. So the first opening statement in that point 36 says that the current domestic gold purchase program of the government poses significant financial financial stability threats to the Bank of Ghana. It went ahead to say that the large and increasing scale of gold for reserve, with the government calls G4R program, notably according to the IMF, since the creation of GoldBod, is a source of significant downside risks, and that is according to the fund, saying that, well, if you look at the current gold for reserve program, especially after the introduction of the gold for oil program, this, according to the fund, is saying that this is posing a significant downside risks to the Bank of Ghana. It went ahead to say that in 2025, quote, through the end of quarter 3, the fund says that, quote, losses from artisanal and small-scale gold transaction component of the G4R have reached $214 million. And according to the fund, this is about 2.2% of the country's GDP, 0.2% of the country's GDP. And it says that this is mostly as a result of trading losses, but also on GoldBod off-takers fees, and that's according to the IMF, stating that let's try and understand when we say the off-takers fee, for instance, what does it mean, right? Let's break this down. And per what we know so far, if you are looking at an off-takers fee, it's basically a charge that is paid to a company that agrees to buy or collect or take delivery of a commodity. In this case, we are talking about gold, and
so it means that people who buy our gold,
exactly, they have a fee. We need to pay a fee to them. Oh, really? And if you go under the IMF assessments, let me read this aspect. It says that if you go to the footers under that page, it says that the BoG purchase $7.6 billion US dollars in gold through the domestic gold purchase program in 2025 through August. And it says that includes about $5 billion US dollars of doré gold from artisanal small scale miners between April and August. So if you are looking at the components of gold that the Bank of Ghana bought from artisanal small scale gold miners, out of that 7.6 billion US dollars of gold they bought in just the first 8 months of 2025, it says out of that 5 billion US dollars came from artisanal small scale miners. And it says that for this, it says GoldBod charges 0.5% ad valorem service on BoG's purchases, as well as 0.258% as a say fee. So that is what we know so far about the Gold for Oil program and Bank of Ghana's Gold for Reserve program, which the fund is saying that there is posing a significant, sustainability threat, financial sustainability threat to the central bank.
I think before the second quarter, or as of second quarter, Ghana was running the Gold for Oil program.
Yeah.
And that BoG made us aware there were some losses under that program as well.
Exactly.
So let's do a comparative analysis of that. How does this compare to losses under the Gold for Oil initiative?
Well, we have a fair idea of the comparative analysis. And in fact, the IMF in page 23 state that if you look at the Gold for Oil program, which the fund says that it was actually discontinued in 2025, it says that the Gold for Oil program in the entire year of 2024 posed a loss of 128 million US dollars. So 12 months in 2024, $128 million of losses from Gold for Oil program. Now, if you compare this to the first 9 months of the current government Gold for Reserve program, which according to the fund, the losses here is as a result of GoldBod off-takers fees and trading losses, that is about 214 million US dollars. So if you compare this 9-month loss in 2025 to the entire year of 2024 of GoldBod, that's a difference of some 86 million US dollars. So you have Gold for Oil posing a loss of 128 million US dollars in 12 months 2024, and in the first 9 months of 2025, off-takers fees from GoldBod as well as trading losses under the Gold for Reserve program is posing a loss of 214 million US dollars.
Now, we understand that the losses in the Gold for Oil program, the IMF doesn't want that to sit on the books of the BoG.
Absolutely.
What more do we know about what is happening now with Gold for Reserve as well?
Well, in fact, we know that definitely the IMF wants the Bank of Ghana to be free of any form of impairment that will come from such gold purchase program. And in fact, we find on page 22 again where the bank states that, quote, the Gold for Oil program, which was functionally discontinued in the second quarter of 2022. And according to the fund, it says that the BoG's remaining exposure to bust under the Gold for Oil program is to be offloaded to the government according to an existing, an exit strategy adopted by the BoG board in May of 2024. So the losses that came with the Gold for Oil, there's an agreement that this should not sit on the books of the central bank. It should be transferred to the government, right? Now, the key question we are asking is, if losses from Gold for Oil is being transferred to the government, where would the losses associated with the Gold for Reserve program, which according to the program is coming from GoldBod off-takers fees and trading losses, where would that 214 million US dollars sit? As we know, the Bank of Ghana wants that of the Gold for Oil to sit with the government and not Bank of Ghana, Kojo.
We'll delve deeper into this here on Top Story. Stay with us. All All right, this is TopStory brought to you by Telecel, Connecting Energies, Holy Insecticide Spray and Coil. Enjoy Holy Sleep and also by Short Pension. Trust into the future with you. We've been joined on the line by an economist, Dr. Patrick Esuming, as well as ranking member on Parliament Economic and Development Committee, Kojo Nkrumah. Let me start with you, Dr. Patrick Esuming. Must we be worried looking at the fact that we are made to understand that GoldBod has brought in some $10 billion?
Well, good evening and good evening to listeners and also to my co-panelists. Thanks for having me. I think we definitely should be worried. Yes, 10 billion, but 10 billion at what cost? Now, what the fund is pointing out is probably something that I'm not sure had been previously been made known to the public. The fact that there's a cost to it. Now, if you go back to gold for oil, there's always an element that something is not being fully disclosed. And obviously, after the fact, we know that there were some losses that was going on somewhere. I think for the GoldBod, it's just been set up, and I'm not sure that there's a clear understanding of exactly what the costs are involved, but now it's been disclosed. So I think it's important that we put whatever exchange gains we are making into the proper context of what it is costing us and then what is the net benefit. But the other thing that perhaps the IMF doesn't talk about is that this 10 billion in reserves, well, it would be worth celebrating if we knew exactly where this gold is coming from. And if we were guaranteed that the gold that we are collecting is not contributing to the environmental damage that is being done. So I think you have to put all of these together. Then we'll be able to assess the net benefits of the activities of the GoldBod. It's also interesting to note that the other component, the domestic gold purchase program, has also generated losses. So it looks like all these major interventions that there's always a perception that we're always giving information about what benefit is bringing us. That cost element is always kept under wraps. So I think it's good that we get to see this, then we can put all of this in proper context. Because when any government entity makes a loss, ultimately it will end up to become a loss of the taxpayer.
But if you look at the fact that this year, generally gold prices has been good on the international market, must we be told why these losses are being reported according to the IMF report?
Well, we absolutely have to be told. Now, so they said the loss is trading losses. So it means we are buying the gold at some exchange rate, or we are buying the gold at some price and selling it at some price that is giving us a loss. Given what is happening right now, given the record prices of gold, it's difficult to understand how we should be engaging in any kind of trading arrangement that is bringing the taxpayer losses. If anything at all, we should be gaining more. So I think it all comes to transparency about exactly what is going on. Why is the World Bank? Why is the central bank involved in this? And what does the GoldBod does that bring costs? I think all of these are things that merit detailed explanation and information, rather than simply telling us this is how much gold you have purchased and this is how much it affects us.
Stay with me. Let me bring in Kojo Nkrumah. He's ranking Parliament Economic and Development Committee. Kojo, I'm grateful to you for joining us here. With your experience of the Gold for All program that was run by your government, what is it that we are not being made aware as to how we know the gold price on the international market is going up, but we're also being told that we are recording losses?
So, good evening to yourself, Professor Suming, and to your listeners. Let me caveat by saying that the ultimate desire of the IMF is that this new process of metanomics, which is backing our economy and our currency with our natural resources, is stopped. That's what they ultimately want. And so, as a country, we should be careful how we take all the prescriptions that they come with. It is important that we use our resources to back our currency, but the how is what matters. And I think it's a very important caveat that we put out there, so that we don't just swallow everything that the IMF is saying, hook, line, and sinker. Now, remember that from the beginning of the year, we in the minority have been saying over and over again that a strategy that the government is using is a strategy that we bequeathed to them. And we see risks in there. But initially, the government wanted to hide it. Remember when they said they were not actually doing intervention or intermediation? It wasn't the gold for reserves or the gold purchase program. Now, as the time goes along, things are forcing them to admit. What is happening in this specific case is about twofold. Remember that the GoldBod has admitted that they've done transactions of about $10 billion. And the IMF is now giving you a clue that about $7 billion of that is funded by who? The Bank of Ghana.
Yes.
Now, on the minority side, we earlier filed an RTI request to the Finance Ministry to inform us whether or not they had properly capitalized the GoldBod so that the GoldBod will be using its own money and capital to do this gold trading and ostensibly making profit and adding back to shareholders' funds. And at the time, the government told us that they rather wanted to move DMMC, which we had started using for this gold for reserves program. They wanted to downgrade it from a limited liability company to a public corporation that didn't require capital, but that they were going to give the PMMC, which was now GoldBod, capital in the 2025 budget to start trading. They didn't do it. So when we filed the RTR request, Finance Ministry then admitted that they haven't capitalized them. Now the IMF is exposing to you that first of all is the Bank of Ghana that has been funding about $7 billion of the work that they've been doing. Remember, the GoldBod has been trying to tell us that it's money coming from the commercial banks. 10 billion cedis, that is about $10 billion, that is about 100 billion cedis. Check the total deposit mobilization of the banks and subtract their reserve ratio, and you'll find out that that's not feasible. So now the IMF is exposing it that it's the Bank of Ghana. The second problem is this. When in that trading, there's an arbitrage, there's a mismatch between the prices at which you are offering to the small-scale gold dealers and the price at which you are selling it on the global market and the charges that you deduct in between, then whoever is doing this trade will make losses. And that is why these losses are being occasioned. And these losses, unfortunately, because it's being funded by the Bank of Ghana, that is why the one it is being passed on to is the Bank of Ghana. So when you are not truthful from the beginning with what you are doing, and you think that because of politics you can hide it, these numbers, as we go along, when they come out, it will show who is funding it and what losses are coming in. I want to conclude by saying that this whole exercise of backing our economy and our currency with our reserves is a good thing. The how is what matters. And as Professor Sumi is saying, it's not just the monetary cost. There's also a second cost. Anybody who says that he doesn't know in this country that GoldBod is buying gold from Galamsey operators is being naive. Because if you check the export data, what the large-scale exporters are exporting hasn't changed much. It is what GoldBod is exporting that has shot up. Now, if GoldBod says it has clamped down on smuggling, and yet we know that there's a lot of Galamsey going on, then who is buying the Galamsey gold? Let's not kid ourselves. So the cost
the IMF says it is buying from artisanal small-scale miners.
But that is grammar. You and I know that apart from that one, there are Galamsey operators. Who are they selling to? Where is the Galamsey gold going? Let's really
it could be that the Galamseys are also holding on to their gold.
Hoarding is illegal, according to the GoldBod Act. So they can't even escape from there. Let's stop playing games and be honest with ourselves. They are buying it. So not only are they contributing to a nominal loss, you say 214. On the minority side, when we calculate, it's about 300 by the end of this year. They are making a loss of about $30 million a month. And they are passing it on to the Bank of Ghana because it's the Bank of Ghana that is funding it. And by the end of this year, you mark it, there will be around 300 million. We don't say these things out of glee. It's because we have had a painful experience. But sometimes when you talk, they don't want to listen. So it's not only a nominal loss of 214 by 9 months. I'm telling you that by our calculation, it's about $300 million at the end of the year. And then secondly, you have now gotten yourself into an institutional cycle of funding the purchase of illegal small-scale mining in addition to the artisanal ones they are doing. What is important we do is not run away from backing our currency with gold, because as they are buying the gold and pumping the forex onto the market, which initially they were lying about, now they've admitted, they are able to suppress the real value of the currency. The normal market trends have not been cured. The normal demand and supply of forex, they've not solved it. It is this pumping that is, causing the appreciation, not even stability, appreciation, no problem.
Okay.
But the cost is about $300 million in nominal terms because of how they have structured it, and then what it is doing to our water bodies. The GoldBod needs to, first of all, have its own proper capital. Secondly, the price disparities that are being occasioned and the charges that they are taking in between, they have to cure it so that the actual trading, they don't make losses on the actual trading. And even if they did, it will hit their books and not the books of the Bank of Ghana. But in any case, when Parliament resumes, we will be asking for further and better particulars so that we can make the necessary recommendations on how to cure this.
Is it your proposal, as the IMF is asking, that the losses in the gold for oil must not sit on the books of BoG but must sit on government? Are you saying that this should also sit on the books of GoldBod and not necessarily the BoG itself?
The government has been lying to us that they are not being funded by the Bank of Ghana. They've been lying to us. They told us they were going to fund them from the fiscals. We checked, they haven't funded it. PMNC or now GoldBod didn't have the capital. Then they told us that the commercial banks have been giving them money. You don't recall? I'm sure you recall. They looked all of us in the face and told us that it's the commercial banks that have been giving them money to buy the gold. So why is the IMF now saying that the Bank of Ghana has made losses as a result of this? So you see, when you don't tell the truth, when the numbers are published and anybody pays attention to the numbers, you will be exposed. It's because it's the Bank of Ghana that is partly funding it. And then there are also charges in between that the GoldBod themselves are putting on it. There's a curious question we have to answer. When they say off-taker charges, who is paying those? Is it the GoldBod that is paying for it, or is the buyers who are supposed to be off-taking from the GoldBod? And so we need further and better particulars. That's why when we go back to Parliament, we'll be asking for those further and better particulars. But it's the untruth that they started with, which is now making all of these things big news. I think that there should be a lot more candor. And then secondly, the thing needs to be funded properly. If you're going to capitalize GoldBod, PMMC was a limited liability company. They had capital. They had a balance sheet. They could trade from that. And if they were having profit, they will add it to the shareholders' funds. If they were making losses, it will hit them. Now you have downgraded PMMC from a limited liability company. You've downgraded it into a public corporation like COCOBOD or something. So when they make losses, it will come and hit government, central government generally. And in this case, that the Bank of Ghana was Nicodemously funding. Now that loss hits the Bank of Ghana.
Okay. GoldBod has just in the last few minutes issued a statement. It says, while the Ghana GoldBod values and appreciates feedback and constructive criticism, it is important to clarify certain misconceptions making rounds in the media space about the trade operations of GoldBod. First and foremost, the Ghana GoldBod has made no losses. Rather, the GoldBod has made significant profit and surplus under 8 gold trading programs in the year 2025. Financial statement of the GoldBod, which is unaudited, published on its website, bear this fact out and indicate that the institution is set to declare income surplus of not less than 600 million for the year 2025. 2. The GoldBod has this year been responsible for only the local purchasing, assay and export of gold for the Bank of Ghana. The selling or trading of gold purchased by GoldBod to off-takers lies in the exclusive domain of the BoG. The GoldBod is not aware of any loss of $214 million incurred by BoG under the Gold for Reserve program on account of GoldBod off-taker fees. The financials of the Gold for Reserve and Gold for Forex programs of the Bank of Ghana for the year 2025 are yet to be audited. Does this help? I mean, they are clarifying that we cannot attribute these losses to them.
So I think the first thing you'll notice that the IMF did not say that GoldBod had made 240 million losses.
Yes.
The IMF says that the Bank of Ghana has made those losses. And the IMF then proceeds to attribute it to the Gold for Reserves program. Now, part of those reserves are also being traded. Who exports those ones? That's where people now bring in the GoldBod. So I think our colleagues at the GoldBod should take it a bit easy. When you're in the public space, people will attack you and say all sort of things, but they should take it a bit easy.
But are they not right to say there's nothing like GoldBod off-taker fees because it is in the report?
Well, that's why I'm saying that we need better and further particulars. When we get to Parliament, we will get that. I think I even mentioned it before you read that statement. Because when I saw it, I even saw it as a bit curious. But here's the point. Whatever it is that the Bank of Ghana is doing, they are doing it partly with the GoldBod. So there will be questions for the GoldBod to answer as well. On audited accounts that they are talking about, it will be good to have an opportunity to look at this on audited accounts and see the numbers that they are talking about. But as it stands now, because the Bank of Ghana has been funding the Gold for Reserves program, part of which is being exported, those losses that are being incurred from that program, that is what the IMF is saying that they are attributable to the Bank of Ghana. And we are saying that the model that they are using, while initially they didn't want to be truthful about it, the risks that we were raising in the model are those risks that are being occasioned now. But we shouldn't run away from the program just because these risks have not been handled well. The model has benefits for Ghana. What we should do is to answer the questions of who is financing it, what are the charges that are associated with it, some more clarity on this off-taker charges they are talking about, so that in the end we can use our goal to benefit the Ghanaian economy on a sustainable basis, but we don't do it at such a high cost, both on the nominal side and then on the natural resources or the environmental side.
Okay, Coach, I'm grateful to you. Coach Oponkruma is ranking member, Parliament Economic and Development Committee. Professor Shuming, obviously we all agree that this good board, creation is a good one that can help the economy. But how do we help the BoG to ensure that it limits the risks that IMF is pointing out?
Well, I think that first of all, we can't just lay all the losses on the BoG. This is an arrangement involving the BoG and the GoldBod. So yes, from the GoldBod side, they might say, well, we haven't made any losses. But this is a transaction involving the government of Ghana with implications for the people of Ghana. Whether the losses is on the BoG side or it's on the GoldBod side, it's a loss that has to be dealt with. I think, clarity and transparency about who is doing what is extremely important. So the people of Ghana will know what you are engaging, what are the costs, and whether it is the right way to use our mineral resources or not. So I think that kind of transparency is important. But, the BoG too should be a little concerned about the rate of the exposure. I think at the time where there's been discussions about the BoG's independence and where it's been encouraged to offload, for instance, the gold for oil. It's curious that you are disengaging from the gold for oil and then engaging another program that's also generating losses. I think all of these are not very good for the image of the BoG.
Prof, I'm grateful to you for joining us here. Professor Patrick Shuming is an economist. This has been Top Story, brought to you by Telecel Connecting Energies, Holy Insecticide Spray and Coil. Enjoy Holy Sleep and also by Shield Pension Trust into the future with you. My name is Samuel Kojo Brace. Up next is Newsnight.